you obviously had this remarkable fight against Pedrosa and beat this remarkable champion. Yet a year later, not much more than a year later,
just over a year,
you lose your title to Steve Cruz.
Yeah.
And all the background to that. And that prompts you pretty much shortly after that to retire at 26. In boxing world now, people aren't even beginning their bleeding careers at 26. Yeah. Another great in tennis, Bjorn Borg, retired at 25.
Yeah.
At 26, it's very young. I mean, I know it's easy for me to say, I'm not the one taking the shots. But at 26, you've lost your title.
Yeah.
To me, talking to you now, with the way that you get animated about certain things, with the way that you explain about determination, it's almost unfathomable to think that you wouldn't go back and right that proverbial wrong.
Yeah, I mean...
i.e. losing your title.
Yeah.
In a manner, because the temperature that you had to fight in and the dehydration and so on and so forth.
But as I mentioned here, I was struggling to make 126. Yeah. And I then did come back a year and a half later. I came back at super featherweight, which was 130 pounds or 9 stone 4. But I went through a tough time, and Barney and I fell out, and then my father died. Yeah. And he was my inspiration.
Right.
And it was very difficult to go on after that. But I did. I then moved to England and resurrected my career and boxed another 4 times. But it wasn't the same.
Why?
And because Dad wasn't there.
Yeah.
I wasn't at home. Circumstances had changed. And did I work hard? I worked my arse off. I trained really, really hard and put every effort that I could into trying to recapture the form that I produced. But there was just that much of a difference, a split second in my punches.
Made a difference.
And at that level, at the top level, and I didn't want to operate as a journeyman.
No.
I didn't want to operate as a guy that's going to be up, performing below.
Not if you've been at that level.
Not if you've been to the world title. No. And therefore, and I knew it's a brutal business, and I'm not afraid to talk about that. It's a brutal, tough business, fabulous sport, but a brutal business. And I wasn't going to be in there when I wasn't performing at my best. And I just said, as soon as that degree drops down, I'm out. I'm gone. And I made that decision after my last fight against Jim McDonald, and I never came back. Yeah. And I never looked back. And I remember being in the car with Don King, and we were coming down from the second Nigel Benn, Chris Eubank fight, and he was in the car with me the whole way down. Reggie Gutters was with me too, and we were travelling from Manchester down to London, and he was going, Barry, you gotta do it, man. I'm gonna give you $5 million. You gotta do it. You gotta come back, and I'm gonna get you on with Azuma Nelson. You're gonna fight him, and I'm going
another featherweight great,
another amazing fighter. And I just said, I'm done. I'm done. No, you. Anyway, he just burned my ear for 2.5 hours of the way down, but I knew I wasn't going to fight again, and that was it.
We're talking about the brutal business of boxing. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about an experience you had in the ring. Your fight with young Ali.
Yeah. It was my second fight in London in a club where people sat in
the Grosvenor House Hotel.
Yeah, the Grosvenor House
I used to live in there.
You used to live in there?
I lived in that hotel for 10 years.
There you go.
And I knew that fights went on downstairs, and I remember the atmosphere inside those fights was very glass tinkling.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Not.
What I'll never forget is that guys turned up in their dress suits, and they had their partners with them or whatever, and everybody eat. And I come from a raucous atmosphere in Belfast, and we come into this room where people hardly made any noise, and you could hear the tinkling, as you say, of the cutlery on the plates, and tapping the cups. And I thought, what a weird place to fight. And Barney said to me, this is going to be odd. And I went, yeah, it is odd. And anyway, I fought the West African super bantamweight champion. He was coming up to featherweight to fight me. I think it was my 17th or 18th fight. He was a nice boxer, sharp, and I went at him. And I remember I had to make 9 stone to the Board of Control to prove to them that I could do the weight. And remember what I said to you. So we weighed in around sort of 1 o'clock. And then I had to rehydrate
on the day of the fight.
On the day of the fight, and then 5-6 hours later, I'm going into box. So it was the first time I'd actually hit 126 pounds or just below it. And I rehydrated as best I could. And so what I found in that fight was I went at the guy in the first, and he was a nice boxer, hit reasonably sharply, found that he was quite quick. I hit him, boom, 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 and I'm hitting him with some really good shots, left hook to the body, and then he was wincing. Then I would go and hit him with a right hand and then a right hook. And I just thought, wow, this guy is another level of toughness. So I had 2 rounds of sort of emptying the tank, and then in the third round, I took a round off and just outboxed him and kept coming forward. And then in the 4th round, I went at him again, and I hit him with the right hand, and he went down, and he got up again, and I hit him with a right hand, and then I moved around, hit him, bang, with a right hook. And he fell down to the floor, and he rolled, and his eyes rolled in his head, and I went, oh, went to the corner. You know, you're standing there, it's like it happens instantaneously, and then you're gone. So I went to he was counted out, and then the corner came in, and then there was, you know, and we're in this really sterile environment, nothing. And then I hear the doctor's over, and then Barney jumps in and says to me, Barney Yusuf, my manager, says,
Yeah.
this kid is really badly hurt. Yeah. And I went, what? He says, he's really badly hurt. And I said, how do you know that? He says, I just know. And I went, oh, right. So we waited till the next day. He went to hospital, went to the wrong hospital, because these were the rules that I implemented when we started with the PBA to force the border control. So they went to a non-neurosurgical hospital. So that was no good. He was there for an hour and a half. Then they had to take him to the neurosurgical hospital. And so the ambulances weren't up to speed.
Yeah.
They weren't
equipped for it.
They weren't equipped for it. So they brought him to the wrong hospital. Then they brought him to the correct hospital. They done the operation. He had a massive subdural hematoma. They drew out the blood that they could. They soldered the vein, stopped it. You know, they cut open his skull cap. They put it back on. It was all of that horror. And we sit and we waited and we prayed and we hoped that he would be better. And he never got better. And they sent him home to die. So he died 5 months later. And that was an awful.
That's as stark as it gets, isn't it?
I mean, and I didn't, you know, as I was saying, I was boxing every month and sometimes twice a month. And I just stopped for 4 months, and I just didn't know whether I wanted to continue, and thought to myself, if I can do this to somebody, you know, and I mean, at the end of the day, you never put on a pair of gloves to kill somebody.
No.
Never do that. And that's not what I ever wanted to do.
But it's a potential consequence.
But it is a potential consequence. And then that's why I was so determined to get the medical standards as to the very best. I know you can never stop it, and we know now that it still happens, even with the great concentration and medical
the resource,
standards.
Yeah, I mean, I went to the Nigel Benn McLennan fight, and I saw literally Nigel Benn taking Gerald McLennan's heart. I didn't realise the damage that was being done there. But yeah, I mean, it's brutal, isn't it?
I was there, and I was there for the Watson, and was there for, you know, Paul Ingle. I was there for, you know, just loads and loads of ones that happened up in Carl Wright from Liverpool, and it was, you know, it's a consequence of the business, and
that will probably in some parts explain your absolute stridency about anabolic steroids and enhancements.
You know what I'm saying is, you know, you have somebody that's on the gear, and they're hitting you around the head. Yeah. It's unfair in all sports, but it's particularly unfair in a brutal business like boxing. Yeah. You know, because and that's why, you know, if you're caught, you're out, and you're never allowed back in. That's always been my attitude. But the night I won the world title, I remembered him. It was the first thing. And I remember crying, talking to Harry Carpenter and saying, this is for this young man. Yeah. This is for him, and that he'll never be forgotten, and blah, blah, blah. You know, I think about the business. Sometimes I think, what am I doing in this business? What am I doing in this crazy business? And
did you come close to quitting after that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no money, not a penny. My wife was working as a hairdresser. I was earning £500 a fight. Yeah. I didn't have anything, and so therefore I had dedicated my whole life, and that's a decision I had to make. You know, I was 22 years old. you're starting all over again. If you're going to quit, you got to start all over again, or else you try your best to be the best you can be, and dedicated to him. Wasn't just an ordinary fighter that beat him, but a world champion.
Yeah.
And that's the way I was able to get through it. But I was on the verge of stopping. So yeah, definitely.